second call of our 2016 webinar series, and my name is Tina Cardarelli, and I'm the State Breastfeeding Coordinator and also the Director of Breastfeeding Services for the IPN and the Indiana Breastfeeding Coalition, and it's Indiana Perinatal Network and the Breastfeeding Coalition who are bringing you these calls every month. And so we also would like to take time to thank our sponsors. So we have two sponsors. We have the Indiana WIC program, who is sponsoring the community-based call, and the even months are community focus calls, and the odd months are clinically focused calls. And we welcome our new sponsor, St. Vincent's Health System, who is sponsoring our 6 clinical calls this year. So we're very glad to have these sponsors so that we can bring this to you in your communities. So next slide. I am very pleased to welcome Eric Beers, who's the Coalition Director of the Indiana Healthy Weight Initiative at the Indiana Public Health Association. I'm so happy to have him as a speaker today, and I've known Eric for, better than a year, and I can't even tell you the growth that I've had learning from him. He's just a wealth of knowledge about working and connecting in the community, and he'll probably tell you in his presentation today how the Indiana Healthy Weight Initiative is connected to breastfeeding, but I'd like to touch on it a little bit so that you understand that in terms of health settings and preventions for obesity, breastfeeding is one of the 6 preventions or settings that the CDC recognizes. And so Eric has played a key role in helping our state coalition to improve our services and find direction. And he is an integral part of the work that we're doing in coalitions with breastfeeding, but his work extends beyond. And so it's with great pleasure that I introduce our speaker, Eric Beers.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thanks for being on this webinar. I'm really excited to talk about connections and engagement. Like Tina said, my name is Eric Beers, and I'm the Coalition Director for the Indiana Healthy Weight Initiative, and I work at the Indiana Public Health Association. Tina did a really nice job talking about the connection between obesity and breastfeeding, and I want to go one step further and talk about not the what, but the how they connect. One of the things that the Indiana Healthy Weight Initiative is really keen to do is to work on big picture policy systems and environment change around obesity. So that is the lens at which we're coming at obesity, and it's the lens I bring that policy systems and environment change when I work with the Breastfeeding Coalition. I want to start off by framing my presentation a little bit. The first thing I want to tell you guys about is how my brain works. When I'm sharing ideas, my mind quickly and easily transitions between practical elements and philosophical elements of an idea or a problem. I've tried to kind of separate these for you as best I can, but just a warning, be ready for me to switch between practical and sort of philosophical elements. I also want to frame how I approach connection and engagement in my work. Like I said, the Indiana Healthy Weight Initiative is a coalition, and very simply, this means that our work is done through collaborations in collective decision making by the organizations that are a part of the Healthy Weight Initiative. Because of this, I come to connection and engagement through the lens of getting organizations and organizational leaders to connect and engage with me. I think this is a little bit different than trying to get individuals like community members, moms, or patients to connect and engage, but most of what I'm talking about I think can be applied to the individual. Let's start with connection. I believe in the power of human connections. To me, human connections are really relationships, and relationships are about trust. Trust building is really personal and a personal thing to do. A lot of what I'm going to share is about personal reflection and challenging yourself to be more connected and open to connections. I've broken down connections into a few different categories. Prepare, listen, make a personal connection, be authentic, and beginnings and endings are important. Preparation is a practical tool. One of the first things I think about when I plan on meeting someone or connecting with them is, quite frankly, what acronyms am I going to use? I'm a passionate person, and sometimes I get carried away with excitement talking about the work I do. It's always a really good exercise for me to think about the acronyms and more broadly about the words I'm going to use when I meet with people. I try to make some assumptions about the people I'm meeting with and how they see the world. I found that people in public health often understand my acronyms but get lost when I start talking about collective impact. Communities and coalitions often understand when I talk about group decision makings and working together but get lost on some of my acronyms. Hospital folks love acronyms, but theirs are often different than mine, and they often see those outside of the hospital as patients, not partners. Businesses are the same way. They think about the bottom line first and look at health through the lens of cost, and at other organizations through the lens of competitions. While these, of course, don't hold true with all organizations, running through these assumptions in my head and reminding myself how the people I'm likely to connect with might think is a really good exercise. I make a habit of asking my dear friend and colleague, Mr. Google, about the people and places I go before I leave. I usually check for a LinkedIn page and learn a little bit about their work or volunteer history, and I always try to read their bios on their organizational web pages. What I'm essentially doing is preparing myself for connections, finding any ways that I can to identify things that I might have in common with this person. I make a habit, I dress different too. This isn't too serious, but every little bit counts. I only get to travel to different parts of the state sometimes once a year, and dressing in a way that helps or at least doesn't hinder me in connecting with people is key. I'm not saying I dress up all the time. On the contrary, I dress down a little sometimes depending on where I go. For me, coming across as stuffy or too Indianapolis can be just as detrimental as coming across underdressed. While it's not a big thing, I really recommend taking a minute to think about this kind of stuff before you meet people. Listening is the single most important way we can connect with someone, and it is often the most overlooked. I try to listen like this dog. When I am meeting with someone, I'm listening, I'm making eye contact, I'm nodding, I'm asking questions, I'm smiling. I'm trying my best to be genuinely interested in what people are talking about. People enjoy being listened to. I constantly have to remind myself that listening is not waiting for my turn to talk. I think people do this all the time, and I think it shines through. people can tell when you're not really listening and just waiting. If you work in public health or for a community organization or a nonprofit, you're probably like me, not doing your job because it makes you a millionaire, but because you're passionate about your cause. This is great. Passion is so important to connection and to our work. But don't let passion be the train that bundles people over before they have a chance to get on board. Save that passion for an appropriate time. When I sense the time is right for me to talk about what I do, after I've been listening, I circle back with something like, can I tell you about my job, my organization, and what we're working on? By asking for their permission, I'm utilizing another strategy. When I get their permission to talk about my cause and my organization, I'm helping them feel more in control of the conversation, and they're less likely to get bundled over by the train that is the passionate speech I'm about to give them about the importance of connection. A great way to further connection when listening is to ask for advice. People feel honored and important when other people ask them for advice. Asking for advice is flattery in a way that isn't over the top. It shows you respect their opinion and think they have answers. Try it. Key to connection is making a personal connection. I believe that we're all hungry for personal connection. Human connection and personal connections drive us as a species. Tapping into it can really be easy. While you're listening to people, be thinking of ways to make an appropriate personal connection with what they're saying. And if they tell you something you can relate to, let them know. The more things you have in common with someone, the easier it becomes to make a connection. Give people ways to follow up. Don't just fly down and connect once. Follow up. I like to send emails after a meeting to say thank you. Or I call in a week or two and check in about something they told me, or to invite them to a meeting or to another event. Following up really creates opportunities for further connection. What's most important here, and something that I fall for often, is I often assume that because I've talked to someone for an hour and enjoyed the conversation, that they're immediately willing to call me or talk to me or email me. It really is not the case, and I really have to be aware of that and really work to help create that space for someone to connect back with me. Like Indiana Jones, you have to be the one to make the leap. I'm always nervous when I talk to a stranger and I don't always know what to say. But what's most important is that I've put myself out there and that I've opened myself up for another connection. Since starting at the Healthy Weight Initiative, I've realized that the phone call is the new letter. What I mean by that is that in the same way people love getting personal letters because they're such a unique form of communication, our super interconnected world of text messages and emails and Twitter and Facebook have really made the phone call a truly personal way to connect with people, unlike it has been in the past. I often second-guess myself about calling. Believe it or not, it makes me really nervous to call someone, to call a stranger. But here are some of the things I tell myself when my nervousness is trying to find a reason for me not to call. I often think that I'm bothering or I'm interrupting someone, and I say to myself, well, maybe you are. But if so, just ask. What I've found is people are actually flattered and surprised to be called out of the blue. but I still always ask if they have time to talk. I say something like, "Thanks for taking my call. Do you have 10 minutes to talk to me about what you do?" I often say to myself, "Eric, an email is so much easier." That's true. Emails are super easy, but emails are so impersonal, and the connection is so shallow that when you make an email, you can't expect much. I always put the shoe on the other foot. I want people to feel comfortable enough to call me and ask me questions and interact with me. So I darn well better be comfortable making the same sorts of connections. I sometimes even use my limited understanding of science to push me to make a call. By calling, I've added another sense of myself to their memory. Adding sound really is another layer of synaptic brain connection about Eric Beers or about the Healthy Weight Initiative that they didn't have before. Be authentic. This is pretty simple. This is simple. People like to connect with other authentic, real people. Right? Authentic people share appropriate personal parts of their own story. Authentic people listen, ask questions, and are genuinely interested in what other people have to say. And authentic people are passionate and share it with others. Beginnings and endings are important. My dad taught me this when I followed his footsteps and became the summer camp director a few years ago. At his second camp, he had a beginning challenge. The summer camp was an Episcopalian summer camp, and a core value of the camp experience was supposed to be inclusivity and loving others. The only problem was that before campers even got to camp, they were divided into two different teams, a white team and a blue team for all camp games and other competitions. How can you expect kids to be inclusive and to love everyone when before they even set foot in the cabin, they had been divided and put into different groups? My dad told me if you want to be successful, especially with relationships, the way you begin is super important. I keep that lesson close now. I don't set myself back by being unapproachable or aloof. I take first meetings seriously. I prepare, I listen. I try to be as authentic as possible and make personal connections. Endings are important too. At another camp, the way that each day was ended was with what was called reflections. It was a quiet time when campers got to share their highs and lows for the day. It was really a deeply personal time. It may seem silly to the outsider, but after just one summer, I quickly realized from talking with campers, their parents, and their staff that the most powerful thing the kids remembered about our camp was not the zip line, not the pool, not the creek, not the mud pit, not the bonfires, but the really thoughtful way that camp ended every day. Try to use endings to set yourself up. Always end with a sincere thank you, but also try and leave with an opportunity to connect or engage again. I say things like, can I call you next week? Can you send me that video, that YouTube video we talked about? Or let's plan on reconnecting next summer when you have some more spare time. The way that you end a connection shouldn't be the door closing. It should be setting yourself up for later. A quick practical aside about connecting and meeting with someone, I have a good way that I like to set myself up to begin and end well when I'm meeting someone for the first time. And that is to make a concerted effort to be hyper-respectful of their time. I'll lead a first call or a meeting I have with someone by saying, we scheduled this meeting for 30 minutes, and so I'm going to try really hard to wrap this up at 2:45. I want to make sure I respect your schedule. I pull out my phone and I check on my watch as we're having that conversation. Once I've said that, I stick to it. And after 25 minutes, I'll say, I said I'd be respectful of your time, and that this would be a 30-minute meeting. Before I go, can we talk about connecting next month, or whatever it is that I choose that I want to end on. This is a win-win. In any case, you come across as punctual and or respectful. And if they have extra time after the meeting and they want you to stay, all they have to do is simply say, it's all right, we have plenty of time, let's keep talking. So connection is being prepared, listening well, making it personal, being authentic, and paying special attention to beginnings and endings. Engagement in my work is the manifestation of good connection. People and organizations engage when they have trust. Connections build that trust. I always keep in mind that like relationships and trust, engagement is fluid and can't be taken for granted. So with engagement, I've come up with these bullets. Again, beginnings and endings are important. Have good meetings. Find the value in whatever people or organizations bring to the table. Talk is action. Say thank you and recognize those that support you. Change can be a bad word. Over-communicate and try to move to action. Like with connection, beginnings are key to engaging well with people. Before you expect anyone to engage with your group, your organization, or your cause, you should be doing some sort of intentional onboarding. Onboarding really is just getting people up to speed. You don't want a new person who's joining your group to not understand how things work, or at least a little bit of the history of what things have done before they start at a meeting. Even an enthusiastic person will lose interest if they don't understand or get lost or don't see the history of what has happened before. Take steps to familiarize people ahead of time. There are lots of ways you can onboard people. Some are more intensive than others. I prefer a one-on-one meeting. It helps me connect with people and helps me understand where they're coming from. You could also develop a long email or a brochure that you send that describes for new people how things work within your group or within your program. It can be a list of the 5 frequently asked questions, or even a quick, short, what to expect YouTube video for people who are getting ready to engage with you. The point is, do something to give people the tools and the knowledge to engage well. Another key piece to engagement and good meetings is to break the ice. Meetings should begin with a chance for everyone to talk and share something. At every meeting I lead, I've made it a tradition to ask for not only the name and the organization, but also something a little silly or personal. I've asked people to share something as small as their favorite animal, or the best vacation they've been on, or their favorite part of the current season. I'm careful not to ask for negative things, like, what do you hate most about the weather today? As that kind of starts the meeting off on the wrong foot. For quiet people or new people, the icebreaker might be the only time for them to say something and to engage. So even that little bit of engagement can be important. A common reason icebreakers don't work and devolve and annoy people is that the person who's leading it isn't wary of time, and a big group takes forever to get through an icebreaker. Going around a room of 30 people asking for a name, their organization, and their favorite vacation destination can take 10 or 15 minutes, and that's only giving 20 or 30 seconds per person. In a big group, I like to do things like asking folks to tell only their neighbors their name and organization and favorite thing, or I like breaking them into smaller groups and having them share in that space. Another thing I do with groups of all sizes is I tell them what I want them to share, and then I give everyone 30 seconds to compose their ideas before we start talking. It's so hard to listen to other people while you're trying to think of what you'll say. By giving people 30 seconds to prepare their ideas, you allow folks the space to listen, and then when it becomes their turn, not to get stuck trying to think of what they're going to say. Have a good meeting. Like I said before, keep it positive. You're shooting yourself in the foot at the meeting if your icebreaker is something negative. Bullies are difficult people. Every group has these. People who aren't respectful of other people's opinions or who like to belittle other people. Hopefully, you don't have a lot of these, but if you do, it becomes really important to nip that kind of behavior in the bud very quickly. So for example, if someone calls another person's idea dumb in a meeting, I might make a note of that and pull that person aside after the meeting. Now, I won't say something like, you can't say dumb or you are rude. I'd say something like, at this organization, we value being welcoming. Saying someone's idea is dumb isn't welcoming. Notice I'm not using my personal values or attacking that person personally. I'm using values of the organization to frame that conversation. I have to constantly remind myself that I'm the only one that holds the big picture of my organization in my head, and meetings need to reflect that. To help my groups with this, I try to do quick recaps of past meetings or the past month's work to remind people of how it all fits the bigger picture. I make sure I'm connecting the dots regularly. I don't assume everyone sees or understands the big picture. When you're working with other organizations, clients, community members, remind them often how what you're doing fits in and how things connect with what's happened before. I like to use examples like, this comes from the strategic plan we developed last year, or this project was so-and-so's idea that we developed last meeting, or what we're doing today builds on the event that we had last month. To help people be engaged between times which I interact with them, a good strategy is to give people mini calls to action at the end of each meeting. It doesn't have to be something grand. It can be something small, like for me, I might say this month it's Heart Month. Tell somebody you love about the link between obesity and heart health. Or our partners over at the State Department of Health are having this great event. Please show your support by attending or sharing on Facebook. I like to make a note of these, and then at the next meeting, I follow up and ask people how they did. If you have talkative people that dominate conversations, dominate planning, dominate your meetings, split them up. A really great strategy is to put all of those kinds of people into one group and all the quiet folks that aren't often heard into another. In this way, you'll be able to get feedback and ideas from folks that might be left out of meetings. Have something the group can respond to ahead of time. An agenda or a program is a good start, but I always try to send ahead the contents of the meeting, and I like to ask people to look over them before we start. Think of it like mini onboarding before a meeting gets going. It's another way that we're giving people the tools and the knowledge to engage thoughtfully at the meeting. Create space to compromise. Sadly, I think compromise is being lost on Americans these days, especially in politics. I think there's this idea that if you compromise your weak, that you've betrayed your party or your principles, and I think this sense has trickled down into our own relationships and actions. In my meetings, I often have to be the one, as the leader, to offer the compromises and push people to them. Don't wait for people to cave to their own pressures. In the business world, there are arbitrators and mediators who are paid to bring two sides together to compromise. This has to be the role of a meeting leader. Have a strategic plan. If not, do one. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I've done strategic planning. I'm okay at it. But strategic planning is too complex and important of a task for me to address in this short webinar. I'm not an expert, but here's what I'll say. You can and you should do strategic planning. Engagement goes better when people know the plan, have bought into the plan, and can see how things fit into the plan. If you're going to do strategic planning yourself, please take it seriously. Spend time researching how to lead the process of strategic planning. Better yet, have a professional or someone who's done it before help you. The United Way and area health education centers often have experienced and professional staff that can help for free or at low costs. Strategic planning is fun and an excellent way to engage people once in a while. If you're doing strategic planning over and over and over and over again, that's really bad. If you're not using the plan you created for your group, that's also really bad. Both of those things make it hard for people to take engagement seriously. Find value in all people. People will want to engage with you more if they feel valued. Finding value in what different people bring to the table is a key part of engagement. We've all been to meetings with the talker, the person who has to make their voice heard and who can often be overbearing or take over a meeting. As leaders or participants in groups or meetings like this can be frustrating. Instead of getting angry, we have to be creative and find ways to utilize these folks. One thing you can do with talkers is ask them to evangelize for you. They can be that go-to person that talks to media or that helps people outside your organization understand what it is that you do. That's a great way to use their talking. Some people talk and talk and talk and talk and talk just because they want attention. You can give it to them in other ways. Put talkers in charge of snacks or preparing the meeting space. Give them a small task and recognize them repeatedly for their contributions so they feel like they're getting the attention they want, just in a different way. Finally, don't be afraid to ask them to talk less. If things they say get too personal or aggressive or taking over a meeting, have a private conversation with them. Use the organizational values to explain what you mean and why it is you're asking them to give other people the space to contribute. There are also doers in groups. They don't want talk, they want action. These people are great to have. I hope you have some of them. The problem with engaging these folks comes when you don't have a project that's important to them or that's big enough for them. I like to give doers, if I don't have a big project or I don't have something that they can work on that's huge, I like to give them little things to do while we build and figure out the big picture. These folks can be asked to make a social media plan for your Facebook, or they can commit to posting 5 times a month to your Facebook page. Ask these people to do meeting setup or teardown. Ask them to bring coffee or snacks. They can print meeting materials or be the ones to help onboard new folks. Just give them something to do, and they'll stay around and stay engaged for when you need them. Then there are your connectors, your social butterflies. These are the people who know other people and who are highly social and well connected. I like to pick these people's brains about who they know or what they know once I've identified them as a connector. I find that really social people often take for granted all the people that they know because for them, being social is natural. They don't really realize all the relationship gold they're sitting on with all the people that they know. If you're having an event or out as a group, stay close to this person at least for a little while. Let their socialness draw people in for you to meet. Also, ask these people to introduce you to folks they know that are important. Social people will love helping you make those connections. Many people who are really social don't really think of it as a tool or a skill to be utilized. They think of it as a personality thing. Show them or challenge them to utilize this bit of their personality to your group's benefit. This is one of my favorite points about engagement. Talk is action. As the preeminent paper salesman and assistant to the regional manager, Dwight K. Schrute says, actions speak louder than words. False. The loudest action is to scream. So don't go to your next meeting and start screaming, but take note of what is underlying in Dwight's statement. Words don't exist in a vacuum. Talking and communicating are actions. And like Dwight says, they're important. Talking and communicating are part of the process that drives change and drives engagement. I visited a small community coalition that was a group of doers. There weren't a lot of them, and they weren't very well connected. They were frustrated by the issue of obesity in their community and wanted to do something. They were passionate, and they wanted to make a big impact. Unfortunately, they weren't actually doing anything, and this was infinitely frustrating for them. When I sat in on their meeting, they started asking me directly, how can we change obesity in our community? What things can we do today to solve the obesity epidemic? The problem is so big, we need to do something now. I finally had to say, look, what you really need to do is widen your scope of what doing something is. Doing something when you're addressing huge systemic problems like obesity is in fact talking. Creating community change is having conversations. I challenge them to take their passion for the issue and to talk to people about it. I challenge them to talk to community leaders, city council leaders, anyone that will listen. I ask them to consider that anytime they had a conversation about the issue, that they were in fact doing something. Talk is cheap. I love turning this one on its head too. We all know what it's like to be underfunded, understaffed, under resources, but talking is free. It's free to go to a county council meeting and speak about something that's important to you. It's free, or mostly free, to call an organization that might be similar, that might be an asset to your group. It's always free to talk to your friends, families, and coworkers about things that matter to you, about your issue. Viewing this talk as free, important actions can be key to engagement. Say thank you and recognize those that help you. Being thankful and recognizing people for their hard work is key to keeping people engaged. In my job, I don't have a budget to afford thank you gifts or give people raises, but there are lots of things that I try to do that are cheap and mostly free to recognize and say thank you. Handwritten thank you notes go a long, long way. I keep a pack in my drawer with stamps and a pack of fine-tipped multicolored markers, and I use them all the time. I also thank and recognize people publicly and at meetings, even if they've just done something small. Another great way that I've just started doing to thank someone is to phone or email their boss. I think this is a really great one. For one, bosses love to hear when their employees are doing good things. You might even be helping that person get a raise or a promotion. And two, while people probably enjoy hearing praise from you, praise from a boss can hold even more weight. You can use technology to your advantage. I like to endorse people that have helped me on LinkedIn, or I like to write them a recommendation. I've even asked people with more fancy job titles and more important positions than myself to do the same thing, as coming from them, a recommendation on LinkedIn or an endorsement might mean more. These are free. Change can be a bad word. I'll admit, I'm trying to change Indiana. I'll bet you're trying to change something too. But when I engage with people, I try hard to avoid the word change. The thing about the word change is that as a word, it implies that something is wrong or bad and it needs to be different. If you say you want to change a person or an organization, you're really in a small way implying that they're somehow wrong or bad. Otherwise, why would you need to change? But this is just semantics. It's just the meaning of the word. It's not your intention, but it's important nonetheless. I like to use, instead of saying change something, I like to use words like I want to add to, I want to enhance, I want to build on. These words have the same meaning as change, but they avoid that implication that something is wrong or bad. Over-communicate. As soon as you think you've communicated enough, communicate a little more. I never assume everyone knows what I'm doing, what I want, or what I'm trying to achieve. In community work and collective impact work, we've got to communicate constantly. So much so that it should feel like we're over-communicating. For one, more communication from you means more opportunities for others to communicate back. Two, the more you communicate and the more you explain yourself, the more likely it is that people will understand what you're doing and will be able to figure out how they can help you or how they fit into your bigger picture. 3, the issues we work on are so nuanced and so dynamic and changing all the time that if we aren't constantly communicating, we won't be keeping up and we won't be able to solve the problem well. Finally, remember the adage, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So moving from talk to action. A better coalition builder than me told me that this work is like building a plane while you fly it. We don't have time with our issues to wait for the perfect plan, the perfect grant, or the perfect circumstances to get started. We just have to work. I think it's okay for people to know that you're building a plane as you fly it. People are attracted to authenticity and honesty. Being real and being authentic also means being honest about the limitations, drawbacks, and shortfalls that you have. Obviously, you want to minimize those things, but if you can't, being honest about challenges shows you understand the issue. Pretending you don't have a challenge or not being open about your challenges will make people think you're missing something completely, or you'll come across as dishonest. Being open about a challenge is also a good way to engage new people. If you've made the space to talk about a challenge your organization or your group has, you've also made the space for someone to think how they can help you or to think how they can have a creative solution to your problem. You never know. There might be a monkey wrangler in your group just waiting to wrangle that monkey. Another key to moving to action and to engaging folks is to simply ask. If you wait for people to volunteer, you're going to be waiting forever. People will do things for you because you asked and because saying no is uncomfortable. Use that to your advantage. I also try to listen for when people say things like, wouldn't it be great if we tried this, or I'd love it if we could do this. I make a note of those things at meetings, and afterwards I pull that person aside and say, hey, I liked what you said there. Would you be willing to take the lead on that kind of project? You don't have to do that work for them, but you can help push them to take that step to start engaging more deeply. I like to use awkward silences at meetings to my advantage. I don't often feel awkward silences that come up when I ask people to volunteer or contribute. This is hard and it can be uncomfortable, but I've been trying to train myself to not let it get to me and just to let that silence hang. It's uncomfortable, but many times it will help drive people to volunteer or engage. Another way to get people more engaged is to take a page out of the Magician's Handbook and have a plant in the audience. It doesn't have to be as sneaky as a magician, but having someone on your side that you know will engage when you bring up a topic can be that key that unlocks the floodgates. Here's how I've done it before. I was struggling to get a group to tackle the idea of doing policy. In my opinion, most people were uncomfortable with it, intimidated by it, and wanted to just continue with the status quo. In between meetings, I met with one of the people in that group who told me that they were really pro-policy and they really wanted to see this group work on it. I simply said, thank you for sharing that with me. Would you be willing to share this with the group when I bring it up at the next meeting? There it was. I had a plant in my audience. Engage back. When people do something for you, do something for them. People are getting sold to and marketed to 24 hours a day. If they take the time to engage with you, you should take the time to engage back. Send a quick thank you email. Go to just one of their events. Recognize them in a group email or a Facebook post. Social media is a great, free, and easy way to engage people back. I like to post things like, I had a great conversation today with so-and-so from this organization. Did you know they've been doing XYZ for 50 years? What a great community asset. So here's my connection and engagement call to action. Be constantly and continuously open to connections. Engage others thoughtfully and with purpose, and listen. That's all I have for today. We're going to do some questions. Thanks so much for listening to what I had to share with you.
I want to thank you, Eric, for your very thoughtful presentation. I like to call myself a community organizer, and I learned a lot today. Just a lot was helpful to hear, and the kinds of things I see people struggling within the community when they struggle with the idea of being effective. And you are such a great teacher about how we as individuals can better engage communities and partnerships. You're so authentic and natural in the work, and you're very much a model of this style of public health, which really is so effective, and we're seeing it all around Indiana, and you are helping us to nurture that model. And you know, there's great potential that exists in the communities, and I think your presentation today gives people ideas about really how to tap into that human potential. So I can't thank you enough. I invite people to ask questions. I don't see any questions. I think that your presentation was thought-provoking. We have a couple of more minutes, and so we'll wait for questions, and I will give some announcements till we see. Please feel free to type your questions into the chat session or section, and then I will give some closing announcements while we wait to see if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Tina. While we're waiting, I'll just do a quick plug for the Healthy Weight Initiative. Likely this fall, we are going to be working with some of our coalition partners on regional capacity building sessions for community organizations and coalitions working on health-related topics. We don't have dates or locations set, but we're working on that now. And what these are going to be is they're going to be outside of central Indiana, in communities. And what we're going to try to do in partnership with some of these other organizations are bring professional capacity building, so leadership development tools, intentional networking, and listening sessions to different communities around the state. So I'd invite anyone on the webinar to go to the Healthy Weight Initiative website, get signed up for our newsletter, and we would love to see anybody working on any kind of health, not just obesity, physical activity, nutrition, but anyone working on health in their communities come to these sessions to build their knowledge, get connected, and to give us feedback.
Oh, great. I think we have some questions. People are thanking you for your presentation. They loved your talk. Thank you, Eric. Exclamation points. Was wondering if you could speak about the impact of power dynamics and community engagement and how that influences the impact of health initiatives.
Ooh, that's a great question, and it's really heavy. I think for me personally, an important power dynamic that I struggle with is Uh, being a male in a predominantly kind of most of my coworkers are female, and I think people, especially men, take that power dynamic of men's ability to talk and share ideas and to criticize. I think we take that for granted. So what I try to do is be thoughtful about the ways in which who I am, what I look like, are going to play into the ways people want to engage with me, and I try to counteract those. I think for men it means being open to listening when people that are women or that don't look like me give me feedback. Um, I think
Okay.
I think that's a really hard question.
I think I think I got an answer out of that.
I mean, I think what the key is I bring it back to being personally reflective. Right? So I'm reflecting on the power that I have. So for another person who's asking the question, maybe they're wondering how to get somebody else to realize their power because they might not realize it in the way that I'm talking about it, in the way that I think I realize the different powers that I have because of the color of my skin and my gender. So I would encourage, if you're seeing power dynamics like that, I would encourage open and thoughtful conversations about just that, about power dynamics. There's lots of great stuff already written on the web that can help kind of spur a conversation that can be a starting point. It doesn't necessarily have to be a coalition leader saying, man, the men talk too much in this group, y'all need to shut up. There are lots of thoughtful people that have written about this that you can use as a base to kind of share and start to have those conversations about identifying those power dynamics.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I have one last very quick question from Kelly, and then we'll wrap up here. It's just about time. Kelly says, as I was taking notes, I got a little behind as you were discussing talk is action. Could you briefly again give us a little overview of what you meant?
Okay, yes, thank you. So I think oftentimes people don't value conversations and talking about problems. And they think that solving big community problems means doing initiatives and spending money. But I really like to encourage people to think about that the process of community change requires communication, and communication is talking. So if people are, I like the idea of folks adding everyday or monthly action items around increasing communication. I think that's really what I mean.
Thank you. Well, I can't thank you enough, Eric, for being a speaker today. It was enlightening, and I particularly hope that this is helping a lot of our breastfeeding coalitions who are in various, ways, they ebb and flow, and some are struggling out there. We've been doing surveys, and I hope some of this information will be helpful. I want to remind people that we are working hard providing EPIC, Educating Physicians and Communities Breastfeeding Training webinars. We're finishing up our first of 4 webinars in Series 1 on March 1st. It is geared to physician practices, and our topic on March 1st from 12 to 1 will be incorporating breastfeeding education into practice. And we have a wonderful Dr. Amanda Dornfield, who has really been a model of this. And so I anticipate this call to be especially great. So I invite you to invite people in your community to attend. And then I do want to, next slide, I do want to give you an update on next month's call, odd month. So a clinical topic, it will be tongue tie and lip ties, assessment, care, and challenges. Lisa Leahy, who heads the tongue tie task force, was a very highly rated speaker. I don't know, maybe she spoke about 12, 14 months ago, so we've invited her back for a recap. Do you want to say that 5 of the calls this year will give free SERPs, and that is one of the calls that we will be giving you free SERPs for, so that's a nice little perk. And I also want to tell you about a new aspect of this call. You will be sent a survey at the end of this call. Let us know how we're doing and the kinds of things that you want to hear in the future. We really appreciate it as we try to improve this product. And I thank you for joining us this month, and we'll see you next month on March 15th. Bye, everyone.